This is a tutorial to play the game Planet Unknown on Board Game Arena. Planet Unknown is a polyomino-based game where you're filling out this planet with various tiles that you have options to choose, and you are also moving up these tracks, gaining benefits along the way. And this board right here is the basic planet and corporation, which controls these tracks and various tech. There are variations that I'll look at a little bit at the end of this explanation, but for now we're just going to look at the basic standard planet and corporation. Again, like I said, the goal is to fill in this planet, to terraform this planet with various polyominoes that come through. And there are a few ways that you score points. Points are these metals here that you can see. You can see them both here on these grids and along these tracks. The two primary ways to score points are by filling in rows and columns. So you can see these numbers up here. These are corresponding with the columns and rows that you fill in. So if you fill in these two spots, you get a medal for that. If you fill in this long row, fill in it completely with no meteorites, we'll get to that, then you get 3 points. Same with the rows. If you fill in this long row, it's 3 points, but if you fill this short one, it's only 1 point. At the end of the game, you might have some empty spots, you might have some meteorites, those would disqualify those columns and rows. That's the first primary way to score points. The second is moving up these tracks. Depending on what tile you place, will move you up these various tracks, which give you benefits and other things, but they also get you past these various medals. And at the end of the game, when you look back at the track, if you're covering a medal or above a medal, whatever that highest number is, you will score that number of points. So if I'm up on this medal here, I would score 3 points. If I'm here, I would score 5, and so on and so forth. There are also some private objective cards that you will choose at the beginning. In this case, I chose one that I get 5 points if I use a certain minimal number of resources. There are shared objectives that you get with your neighbors. So mine is having the largest clump of red resource connected on my board with my neighbors. Those will change. Each person has a different competing goal they have with their neighbors. And you get points for clearing out these life pods or clearing out meteorites with your rover, which will show how those come through. The game is actually not too difficult. It is basically just choosing a polyomino and putting it on your planet, and then depending on what colors are on that polyomino, various things happen with the tracks and others and other effects. We can look here at this. We call it Susan. In the physical game, it's literally a Lazy Susan type circular container that has these various shapes of polyominoes. Now it's important to note, these shapes will never change. This shape here will always be in this position. And there's an outer circle and an inner circle. And again, all the shapes will be those shapes of polyominoes. What changes is what's on the polyominoes, the various colors and other effects that exist on those polyominoes. So the first thing that happens is whoever is the commander, or whose turn it is, will decide how they want to orient this circular container, this Lazy Susan. And they can keep it where it is if they really want what's in front of them, or they can move it to any other position. These circles don't move independently. It's one big thing. So you will have access to one of these columns of polyominoes. So when that first player or that current commander rotates this, then you will be able to choose from one of the two polyominoes that exist in front of you. So for me, as the yellow player, I can choose between these two, but if they spin it, I might have to choose between these two, or so on and so forth. Typically, the outer ones take up more space but are harder to fit, and the smaller ones are on the inner circle, which may need to be filled in, used to fill in some of those gaps. You'll notice, actually let's look back at that, you'll notice that all of the polyominoes have different colors on them, and some of them have other symbols on it, like the meteorite symbol right here. That's what that orange flame ball is a meteorite. Whenever you play one of these polyominoes, you get to move up the track of any color that exists on that polyomino. So if I played this one, I would get up to move up the black track and the green track. And in this case, there would be a meteorite that would fall on this spot right here, this square where the meteorite shows. And remember, meteorites mean you can't score the points for the row until you clean those up with your rovers. This one here would let me move up the blue track with some restrictions. We'll talk about that, and the red track. This one here, the black track, and then this yellow one basically lets me choose a track to move up, but it has to be either one that's on the polyomino or that it is touching, that this yellow is touching. So it's not any track you can move over. It's only tracks that either exist on that same polyomino or that this yellow section is touching around it. You can move up any of those tracks. And BGA will very easily show you, here are the tracks that you can move up. But if you ever put this down, you're wondering, like, why can't I move up the gray track? That's the one I want. If it's not next to a gray track, then it won't let you. All right, so those are the 5 different tracks: black, green, blue, red, gray, and then this is the wild. When you place the polyomino, the first one has to be somewhere touching the edge, and then from there they have to be adjacent to, orthogonally adjacent to, one that is already placed. Now there are some ways to avoid having to do that. For instance, this tech right here lets you ignore that rule, but for the basic rule, you have to be connected to tiles that already exist on your planet. All right, now that we know what placing a tile does, let's go over the different tracks. Again, these are for the basic corporation. The black track is just a basic moving up here, and whenever you hit one of these, let's see if I can, no. Whenever you hit one of these numbered cards here, there's 1, 2, 3, and 4, you will get to choose from a deck, from the associated deck. So the first one you get to choose from deck 1, then deck 2, deck 3, then deck 4. These are cards that give you either immediate or end of game bonuses. Maybe the immediate bonuses are just, it gives you these biomass squares, which are things that can fill in single spots if you need. Maybe it's an end of game one that gives you just a number of points, or gives you points based on a condition. The thing with these is there's only 4 cards, or as many cards as there are number of players for each level, and so the first person that gets to level 1 gets their first choice out of those 4 and gets to see what other choices there are. And then the next person to hit level 1 will get to look at the rest of those cards and see. This right here in BGA kind of tells you what everybody has chosen. It's got an exclamation point next to a number and then another number. This is basically saying the exclamation point is for the immediate cards. So any number here, if it says 2 here, then that means I've chosen 2 cards that give me an immediate bonus. And then maybe there's a 1 here, I've got 1 card that's an end of game bonus. So it gives you kind of a sense of what's there. So that as you move up that track, you get medals, as with all the tracks, and you get those cards. You'll also notice these little colored spirals. Those are easy. Whenever you move onto one of those spots on a track, you can move on another track or the same one. It basically is a free movement somewhere else. So sometimes you would just move just to get onto that square so you could move something else. Because again, you want to try to get the tracks up as high as you can, because that gives you more medals. If you can get to the top here, you can get some real bonuses. So that is the black track. The blue track doesn't really have any special powers per se, but it is a lot of points, and you can only move up the blue track if you overlay the blue with some ice patch. And this map is showed here. Other maps have different types of ice patches, and it doesn't have to be completely overlaid. So we saw this 2 piece here. If either one of these squares is touching one of these ice patches, then that's considered overlaid, and it will let you move up that track. That's the only way. So there's some bit of restriction if you want to get points out of those blue polyominoes that you place down. The green lets you move up, and whenever you hit one of these spots, it gives you a 1 square biomass square that you can place anywhere with basic rules that apply about adjacency and such. And so it lets you fill in holes that you may have gotten from placing weird polyominoes and not being able to fill in all the spots. So those can be very helpful, especially if you get to this level, at least on this corporation, where you can save those till the end of the game and then fill them in. Like after you get to this level, you can fill them in later and put them in exactly the spot that gets you the most points to complete those rows or columns. That's the green track. Let's skip the red for now. The gray track, we've already alluded to it a bit. It's as you hit these various levels, you get certain powers, and these will change per corporation, but the basic ones are first, you don't have to be adjacent with your tiles. You can save your biomasses to the end. There's this one here lets you do double water advancement if you can overlap it correctly. These ones let you avoid meteors altogether, which meteorites can get you points at the end of the game, but it's a lot easier just to not have them to begin with because you have to go clean them out with the rover. So those are various techs that you get as you move up the gray track here. All right, let's talk about the rover. So the first time that you place a red like this, the first level on this is to place a rover. The rover will go on that tile. You can pick which part of the red that you want it to go, and that's the first level. Then every number that you go up lets you move that rover that number of spaces. And what does a rover do? It does two main things. One, it picks up these life pods, which give you just straight up points at the end of the game, one for each, and also clears out meteorites that have fallen on these various polyominoes. And those you get points for every 3 that you clear out. Again, getting those meteorites out is very important so you can score those column and row bonuses. If you place a polyomino either on a life pod or on a rover, if a rover is like on a blank spot and you place the polyomino on top of it, then that rover or that life pod will be destroyed. So be very careful. Sometimes you will destroy a life pod just because you need to fit the polyomino in there, and that's fine. You're probably not going to get all of them. I would avoid destroying your rover. You do get a second one. If you get up to here, you can have a second rover, and so you can choose which one to move where. But that's it. You just have the 2, and so if you destroy either one, then this track becomes pretty useless. As you can see, as you go higher, you get more movement, and the movement can be split among the 2 rovers that exist. It's always just orthogonal placement, and as you use up the movement, it will show you where you can move. You just click the rover, and it'll show you can move up, down, left, or right. Those, again, are the 5 tracks, and they coincide one with the other. So again, you continue along this. I'm going to skip forward a bit so you can kind of see what a bit of a filled in planet with rovers looks like here, and then we'll talk about final scoring. Okay, this is about halfway through the game. I forgot to mention that the game ends when either one of these piles of tiles goes empty, and you can see how many there are in each pile. So if anybody gets it spun in front of them and they take the last tile where one of these, they're called depots, is completely empty, that will trigger the end of the game, the last round of the game. Or, which is probably more likely, if somebody cannot place either tile on their planet because there just isn't space for it, then that will also trigger the end of the game. That's what happened in this game. It ended up being that somebody could no longer, they only had like single spots open and they could not place what was in front of them on their board. One other thing I forgot to mention is when you put these down, these polyominoes with the red for the first time, the rover can actually go on any tile of that initial polyomino that you place. It doesn't have to be on one of the reds. You can see here though, I kind of gone up the tracks pretty evenly. A few meteorites exist. You can see as well it tracks which ones you've completed and not completed. So for instance, I've got this one done and this one done. Obviously those are the easiest. But this one, for example, even if I filled in these 3, it wouldn't be filled until this meteorite has been cleared. I've cleared 4 meteorites so far and gotten 2 life pods here. This is my rover right now. I've been kind of going up the rover track quite a bit. In fact, I just got my second rover, so I can work from both sides to try to clear those out. And otherwise, I got to level 1, so I didn't have to worry about tile adjacency and so forth. Now you can see other people's planets as well. In this case, so for example, this player went huge into the black, where they got a bunch of these early black and yellow tiles to where they went up the black and then they could go up any, and then so they just kept going up the black, up and up, and they were able to get 4 of those cards right away, 3 which they used pretty immediately and 1 they're saving for the end. And then, you can also see what each player has as their neighbor bonus. So in this case, the player is looking for the most unique areas of Civ terrain. So like specific spots of the gray, like isolated spots. This person has seems to be winning that one. This one is the largest single area of tech terrain, so the largest kind of gray area. Currently not winning that, but it'll kind of show you your neighbors and who has more and how much they have. So this person has 3, this 2, and so you can look at those. Actually, sorry, the neighbor ones are on the both sides. So on this side it's the gray, so it's showing that I have 3 and this person has 2, and so I was getting the 5 for that. Where on this side, the person is doing the individual black ones. Well, this player only has 1 big black section. This player has 6 different black sections, so they're winning the 5 points for that. So you can look at those neighbor bonuses. In my case, I am not winning because they have a 7 on the red side. I am winning the gray side because I have 3 gray in a row instead. So you can look at those too, and they each can give you up to 5 points. These points are live, they'll track as you go, including my private one as well, and it'll show how my points are going along. And these points, besides these end of game bonuses, these points are pretty accurate towards being the end of the game. So, end of the game is triggered by something running out or somebody not being able to place anything. Then points will come from all of these check marks that you get because you get the complete rows and columns with no empty spaces and no meteorites. Any life pods or meteorites that you collect, the number that you see as you hover over it, it shows what it's covering, because in case you're covering a metal, it'll you get that many metals or that many points. But in this case, I currently have 1 point here, 2 points there, none on this track, none on that track, and none on that track. So as I move up those, especially the water, I can get some more points that way. And then your private objectives and your neighbor objectives. And that is the basic game with the basic planet and basic corporations. I won't go too much into the other planets and corporations, but I will show you a little bit of what that looks like. Okay, this is a different game where the option for asymmetric planets and asymmetric corporations was selected. And so at the beginning of the game, everybody will be able to either choose the basic planet and coalition or corporation, or an alternative one. And that's the current ones that are chosen up here are the green ones, and the blue ones are ones you could switch to. So in my case, for example, I have either the basic planet or this Persephone, which doesn't actually have many benefits. Some of them are just kind of trickier, more puzzly to work with. In this case, there's a certain resource that cannot be placed in any specific quadrant. I think if you overlap, it's okay, but this one cannot have any gray tiles in this whole quadrant or whatnot. Everything else is the same. Some planets provide more benefits, some are just kind of restrictions. But again, you always have the option to just use the basic planet if you don't want to either have the benefits or have the challenge or restrictions. And it'll explain what those are up here. And then on the corporations, some of the tracks will be different and these texts will be different. So here's the basic one, but if I switch to this one, it's very different here. So this gray track, instead of going from 1 up to 5, it starts at 5 and then goes down to 1. So I kind of want to avoid going up too high on the tech track. Well, you might ask, well, how do you get techs? Well, on this corporation, anytime I pick up a life pod, I place it on one of these tech ones instead of for the point ones, and then I can take that advantage. So it's just a little bit of a variation. And some of these other things are varied as well, right? Like the rover movement doesn't get up to 4 on that one. And those are just some options that you'll have. And you can look into the instruction books for the more details about what all of that means, but just some variation there. But you'll always have options to do the basic planet and the basic corporation. Then you click confirm and you move on with the game. All right, that was Planet Unknown. I hope this was helpful. Enjoy.